Here's a question I want you to think about for a second. What's the difference between a student pilot and a professional aviator? See, it's not talent, it's not a job title, and it certainly isn't experience or a resume alone. No, it's the mastery of 4 critical skills. Every pilot gets taught them, master them, and you fly. Skip them, and you never truly earn your wings. Today, we're talking about the 4 critical skills every leader needs to master. Well, welcome back to the Frontline Leadership Podcast, where we help frontline leaders become professional leaders who transform their business bottom lines in the process. I'm your host, Craig Coyle, former Apache pilot, aerospace leader, and founder of Operation Lead. Today, we're continuing with episode 7 in our podcast launch series, where we're going to continue our conversation around the first pillar of the Lead Like a Pilot framework, flight school. Last week, we talked about ground school. We laid the proverbial foundation for our leadership. And today, we're talking about flight training. We're going to build upon that foundation. So let's dive in. Here's where we are on the journey. Last week, we talked about ground school. We talked about who we need to become as leaders. We need a solid foundation, something that cannot be shaken. We talked about how we need to see the world, how we need to think, how we need to see others, how we need to see our environment. We embodied this through principles and values, emotional intelligence, broadened development, and systems thinking. In essence, we talked about who we need to become to transition from individual to leader. And today, we're taking the next step. We're transitioning into flight training, specifically the 4 core skills that every pilot needs and every leader needs. See, these are the tactical competencies. It's what we have to do as leaders. Ground school teaches us who we need to become. Flight training teaches us what we need to do. We build upon our foundation. We start adding structure to our building. And there's 4 core skills that allow us to do that. 4 core skills that make up this structure. In aviation, these skills are absolutely non-negotiable. Every pilot learns them, and we internalize them. They become a subconscious framework for how we operate and think and do everything we're taught to do. Aviate, navigate, communicate, and contingencies. Every pilot needs them. And just like in aviation, so does every leader. So let's break them down. Here's the first skill, aviate. In aviation, there's a simple truth. Only the pilot can fly the plane. It's what they've been trained to do. It's what they've committed their career to learning and mastering. That's their primary responsibility. Everything else that takes place is secondary, regardless of how important it may seem. So let's crystallize this through maybe a silly little example. Imagine you're on a commercial flight. About halfway through, imagine that the pilots decide to up and leave the cockpit, walk towards the back of the plane, and start serving all the refreshments to the passengers. You'd be a little concerned, right? I mean, so would I. Who's flying the plane? We would never see that happen in aviation. But don't we kind of see that phenomenon take place in leadership all the time? I mean, we get pulled into tasks that anyone can do, while so often neglecting the things that only we can do as the leaders of our team, whether or not we've defined those things or even know what they are. Aviate means mastering your core craft as a leader. Things like leading people, setting direction, creating clarity, making the decisions that only you can make. Those familiar with Lean Six Sigma world might crystallize this as leader standard work. But it goes so much further than that. It's having a clear understanding, whether or not anyone else around you knows, of the things that are your burdens and responsibilities for the team and the people that you manage. It doesn't mean doing everything. It means doing what only you can and must do, and doing it consistently and doing it well. So here's the question. Are you flying the plane? Are you in the back, doing what somebody else can do? Better yet, are the leaders on your team flying their planes? Or are they doing what other people might be better suited to do? Because if you're not clear on what only you can do as a leader, you'll default to doing everything or doing all of the wrong things. And if you continue to do that, there are two outcomes. You either burn out or you fail in the process. So master your craft first. Identify what only you, as the leader of your team, can do. What are your burdens? What are your responsibilities? What are the leadership duties you have to fulfill in order to help your team take a step forward each and every day? That's mastering your craft. That's learning to aviate. Skill number 2 is communicate. Here's something that usually surprises people when I bring them inside to a pilot's world. 80% of flying is communication. It's not stick and rudder. It's not cyclic and collective. It's not systems knowledge or airspace understanding. No, it's communication. Pilots are always communicating, whether that's before the flight, during the flight, or after the flight, with their crew, with their passengers, with other aircraft, and with air traffic control. And for new pilots, this is consistently, and I can attest to this as a new pilot at one point, it's consistently one of the hardest skills for them to learn. It's like learning an entirely new language. It's like learning multiple new languages because every distinct entity you have to learn how to communicate with requires a different style and a different technique. Isn't the same true in leadership? I mean, communication for leaders is a multiplier. It's how expectations get set, how people get held accountable, how feedback gets delivered, how alignment and purpose manifest in teams and organizations. But without it, misalignment, confusion, conflict, the weeds we've talked about before start to manifest and grow. Here's what makes communication so hard. In order to be effective at communicating, you have to be disciplined and incredibly intentional. And you have to be aware of the fact that the way leaders communicate isn't natural. It's a two-way street. It's about what's received, not necessarily what's said. You have to learn how to communicate clearly, consistently, repetitively, to the point where sometimes it feels like overkill. They need clarity on what's expected, why it matters, how they're doing, where they're going. For most of us, this doesn't come natural, and it never happens by accident. That includes difficult conversations. It includes feedback that feels uncomfortable, expectations that need reinforcing, adjustments in the midst of a plan that's maybe not going the way you initially expected for it to go. Communication isn't just talking. It's producing the clarity that drives action, that creates performance, and ultimately results. And if you're not communicating, you're not leading. It's that simple. Just like a pilot needs to communicate in order to get to their destination safely and efficiently, so do we as leaders need to be proficient at doing the same. And the problem here is that most new and frontline leaders never learn to cultivate this critical skill. Okay, skill number 3, aviate, communicate, and navigate. Here's an important question to ask yourself. Do you know where you're leading your team towards? Better yet, does your team know where you're leading them towards as well? If you're a leader of multiple teams, does each subordinate team leader in your organization have a destination they're guiding people towards? See, navigation is about setting a destination and course correction along the way. Pilots don't just take off and hope for the best, trust a GPS computer to lead them to a destination. No, they're always thinking about their destination. They're planning for it. They're submitting flight plans. They're identifying checkpoints along their route to enable them as they progress along the path that they've planned. As a leader, we have to learn how to do the same. Our team needs to know where we're going, why it matters. Are we on track? See, the problem is too many leaders are constantly stuck reacting and firefighting every single day. And this is especially true in the lower levels of leadership, where people often aren't instinctively trained in how to navigate their teams to destinations. They manage the day to day without providing contextual, long-term direction. They're reacting to what's in front of them instead of intentionally guiding their teams towards a clear destination. And navigation requires three things, really: a destination, milestones, and progress along the way. If you can't clearly answer those questions, then you're wandering. And wandering teams don't produce long-term, consistent, desirable results. This is the shift from reactive management to proactive leadership. From putting out fires to setting direction and achieving or reaching your destination. Something that's so often taught to executive leaders, but rarely reaches the middle or lower tiers of our organizations. But when it does, it sets organizations apart in more ways than you can imagine. Navigate means you're not just managing. It means you're leading people somewhere specific. And finally, skill number 4, aviate, communicate, navigate, and contingencies. You've probably heard of the Miracle on the Hudson before. It took place in January 2009. It was a U.S. Airways flight at LaGuardia Airport, piloted and captained by a guy by the name of Sully Sullenberger, who's been immortalized by Tom Hanks in a motion picture. And what happened was, shortly after they took off out of LaGuardia, the aircraft hit a flock of birds, causing both engines to lose power. And the pilots were forced to immediately analyze the situation and determine what to do. Well, they were really fortunate. They quickly identified the emergency and rerouted the aircraft to safely glide into the Hudson River, and all 155 people on board survived. But the question that rarely gets asked around this event is not just how they pulled it off, but what went into pulling it off. And here's the key insight from a pilot's perspective: they were prepared. See, pilots train for emergencies relentlessly. I would argue it's upwards of 80% of the training that we do once we build a foundational skill set of aviate, communicate, and navigate. We spend endless hours in simulators, training, understanding, learning how to identify and analyze and assess emergencies that could potentially manifest in the aircraft. We memorize exactly how we're required to respond to each and every emergency that can happen. And we practice over and over and over how to execute those action steps so that we have immediate and instinctive action if they were ever to happen to us in the aircraft. I've had many situations in my own personal life where I've benefited from this emergency training. If you think about it, as leaders, we need to use these skills to our benefit as well. Why? Well, because emergencies are bound to happen in leadership. I mean, here's a simple reality. If you've been in leadership long enough, you know that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you face a hardship, a challenge, or a difficulty in leadership. So the question becomes, do you want to prepare yourself for it? Or do you want to have to react to it? Difficult situations will happen in your leadership. Public confrontations, sudden resignations, project failures, safety incidences, conflict between team members, or conflict addressed at yourself. These aren't ifs, they're whens. So the question is, will you be prepared? Will your subordinate leaders be prepared? Most leaders aren't. It's an honest truth. When these situations happen, they're forced to react emotionally. They make hasty decisions, and typically the situation spirals. And when things settle down, a few hours, a few days, maybe a few weeks later, they look back at the situation, wishing they handled it differently. Well, here's your opportunity to choose to handle it differently ahead of time. Contingencies mean identifying these potential emergencies before they happen so you can understand how to become aware of them as they begin to manifest, and you can choose how the best version of yourself or how the best version of your team would react and address them. You identify these emergencies ahead of time and you create your response plans. You brief yourself and your team on what to do when, not if, they happen. So what challenges can you foresee in your leadership? What challenges can you foresee for your team? How will you recognize them? What's your action plan? What would the best version of yourself do in these situations? See, the difference between a reactive leader and a proactive leader is this. One panics, the other prepares. Comes down to intention and a willingness to do the hard work before the situation ever becomes reality. Prepare for emergencies before they happen. That's contingencies. Okay, now we've covered 2 of the 3 phases of our flight school pillar. Ground school is your foundation. Flight training is your skills. Aviate, communicate, navigate, and contingencies. But that's not everything. There's a 3rd critical component to flight school that ultimately is embraced in every element, every pillar of the Lead Like a Pilot framework. And that's flight experience. This is where you take everything you've learned and you apply it in reality, in the real world, with supervision, feedback, and support. 3 critical things that help application turn into knowledge. See, in pilot training, you don't just learn some knowledge in the classroom and then go out to an aircraft on your own and try to figure it out. No, that's crazy. You fly with an instructor pilot. They're your safety net. They demonstrate maneuvers for you. They teach you where you're erring. They provide you feedback. And they give you an opportunity, a safe place to hone your skills and ultimately take a step towards mastering your craft. They sit next to you. They correct you in real time and progressively give you more responsibility of the aircraft as you progress in developing your skill set. And shouldn't leadership development work the same way? We, as leaders, as new budding leaders, we need practice, we need feedback, we need support, we need coaching. We need a community that supports our growth and holds us accountable to doing the things that only leaders can do, and that so many of our organizations will never force us to do. That's what flight experience is. And it's also where we're headed next. Because flight school is important, but without a bridge that allows us to take the knowledge we've developed in flight school and start applying it each and every day, our knowledge is useless. I know a lot of people say knowledge is power, but I disagree. I think knowledge with application is power. And that's what pre-flight is all about. Pre-flight's the second pillar of the Lead Like a Pilot framework. It's your daily and weekly routines, the systems that turn knowledge into consistent action and performance. It's how, as leaders, how we mitigate risk and maximize potential. Flight school taught you the foundation and the skills. Pre-flight teaches the routines that bring them consistently to life. Okay, so here's what I want you to do as we wrap up today's episode. Let's take a step forward in our awareness so we can identify the best opportunity for us to grow, either in ourselves as leaders or help inspire and grow the leaders on our team. Rate yourself or rate your team, your organization on a scale of 1 to 10 in each of these areas. Aviate. Have you identified your core responsibilities and burdens as a leader? And do you own them? Have you mastered your craft? The things only you can do. What about communication? Do you understand how to effectively communicate internally and externally within your team, to the leaders you work for, to the teams to your left and right? What about navigate? Have you identified a destination for your team? Have you communicated? Have you identified milestones along the way? And do you know how to identify your progress and how to course correct if necessary? And then finally, contingencies. Are you aware of the potential emergencies that can manifest in your leadership or on your team? How might you figure out how to identify them? What would the best version of yourself do to respond to them? Does your team know how to respond to these emergencies? Remember, this is an opportunity to just be aware and be honest with yourself so you can take the best next step forward. Whichever one you feel like is the best place to focus, just focus on that this next week. Just one skill. And look for some resources. I mean, there's a million resources out there. A book, a podcast to help you take a step forward in whichever area you choose to move forward in. And look, if you want some help building these skills, we've got a ton of resources available at operationlead.com. And if you want to get ahead of the game before next week's episode, go to operationlead.com/checklist and download our pre-flight checklist, which is meant to be a bridge from these skills we talked about today to how to implement them consistently and routinely on your teams each and every day and each and every week. And for senior leaders looking to integrate some systematic development into how their organizations operate each and every day, there's plenty of resources on operationlead.com for you all as well, and an opportunity to reach out to us. No cost, no pressure, just an opportunity to have a conversation about what's possible in your organization. So here's what matters. Ground school gives you the foundation. Flight training gives you the opportunity to build upon that foundation. It's the 4 critical skills that create the structure for this leadership building we're creating. 4 skills every leader needs. Aviate, master your craft. Communication, 80% of what leaders and pilots do. Navigate, provide clear direction. And contingencies, prepare for emergencies. These aren't optional. They're the very foundation and structure of professional leadership. Here's the problem. This is where most development in our world today stops. Most development is focused strictly on these concepts, these skills we've highlighted today in flight training. Some of the best development focus on the ground school component and flight training, but most of it stops there. But here's what you and I both know. Knowledge isn't power without application, and that's where we're heading next. Next week, we're moving from flight school to pre-flight. We're turning knowledge, we're turning development into consistent application. And this is where great leaders are truly formed. Until then, I'm Craig Coyle. This is the Frontline Leadership Podcast. Let's lead.